The thing that first got me into the world of tabletop role-playing was actually a computer game. The very first Baldur's Gate, when I was like 9 years old. Baldur's Gate was also the first game to adapt the rules of 2nd edition Advanced D&D into a digital format. So I couldn't even get past the Nashkel Mines because there was no way you could explain to a 9-year-old what Thaco was. But I loved playing it, especially making characters over and over again and just wandering around because of everything the game evoked with its art. The painted background, the ambient sounds, the music playing right now. It didn't really matter what the rules were, because as far as I cared, the art both evoked and delivered an amazing fantasy world that I got to live out a fantasy within. You probably had a similar experience that got you into RPGs. A lot of people, and not just people my age or younger playing video games, but a lot of old school players took up the hobby because of the art they saw, before they cared to know anything about the rules. Eventually, I did figure out the rules enough to beat the game, but I never really needed the mechanics to enjoy the game. It was the art that made Baldur's Gate for me. And I think that's how it is for all tabletop role-playing games, because that's what they are for most people. And that's why I'm going to tell you that if you are a small RPG designer like me, you really should not use AI art. The way people talk about role-playing games online, you'd think that it's all about the mechanical design. And it's not like it's not, but take it from me as someone with lots of experience in publishing and media in general, and whose micro RPGs have gotten to at least a few hundred people now. The details about what you make, especially the rules of a tabletop RPG, are completely out of your hands once it's with the audience. The thing you made that sticks with them and does the most to decide how they experience what you made is the overall impression and composition. Or a better way of putting it, is the vibes. For example, the first extended review of The Apprentice's Grimoire that I've seen in the wild was of someone using it to play a D&D adventure. So you know, that is not at all what this game is designed to do. This is a super rules-light game you can learn in minutes, where your character sheet is a fantasy novel that you use to randomly generate spells. There are no hit points, or rules for combat, or even dice. Well, I guess the book is kind of your dice too, but I can't begin to imagine how they used it to play D&D. But it was a positive review, so they clearly made it work to bring some unpredictable magical whimsy to a magically whimsical adventure. And that's actually what the game is meant to do. This is why I would be shocked if it took more than 2 hands to count the number of D&D games in the world that are actually playing by all the rules as intended. Because people change RPG rules for their groups all the time. And most of them probably don't know or care that they're doing it wrong, so to speak. And because people start playing a role-playing game long before they know the rules. When I was creating Cube AI and The Apprentice's Grimoire, I knew that they would live and die on their art. Even if they couldn't have much art, or the highest quality art, the art they did have would not only tell the players as much as the rules would about how to play the game, it would be the first thing to get the players' imaginations going. For The Apprentice's Grimoire, it was all I could imagine for a while. I had the basic idea of the game, and the game is just one basic idea. You flip open your favorite fantasy books to find magic words that drive the story and cast spells that are totally out of your control. That meant it really could have one central image that fully represented the game. So, collaborative friends, unpredictable whimsy, tactile mechanics with beloved books, powerful and uncontrollable magic. A good art piece could capture all of that. And even though the game would be free, I was willing to pay to make sure the cover did it justice. It turned out that I had a very specific vision for this cover, and there were surprisingly few artists that I was willing to trust to do it. Then I found that the ones I would trust were a bit outside my price range. And I'll explain in a moment why using AI was obviously out of the question, so what you're seeing right now is me making the cover art for The Apprentice's Grimoire. This was a foolish decision, even if it was the only one I could afford. An RPG that deserves to be played is an RPG that deserves professional art, because RPG art is by far the most important tool for evoking a compelling idea of what we're gonna do in this game. It's that RPG designers really need to understand. The first thing your design is doing is not building a system of rules for people to follow. That's an essential part of it, but it's usually the last thing players actually do, and it's the part that they're going to change the most anyway. Instead, your design is a pitch to a writer's room. It's your storyboard of concept art that says, let's all play this together to make this feel real. And the players can start that play as soon as they see the art. Keep in mind that that kind of play, of imagining the game outside of an actual session, probably accounts for most RPG playing that actually happens. If you don't think so, remember that you may be thinking of players through a kind of privilege that's easier to forget, which is that you probably have at least one regular RPG playing group. But a lot of people who collect RPG books don't, at least not consistently. Those players don't get to play with the rules in the same way that others do, but they do get to play with the writing and the art and creating interesting characters the same as everyone else. So they're still players. They might even be most players. So if you look at this cover and you imagine personalities and motivations and strengths and weaknesses and stories, then it's doing its job of already being the game. When and if the players meet, they're going to bring all the things they imagined and got excited about. And that's going to create the game more than anything else. The rules are there to help deliver the fantasy that's already been evoked. But if the fantasy wasn't evoked to begin with, then there's really no game for the rules to be for. So if this art doesn't do that for you, well, then I should have hired someone. Because if I decided to use generative AI instead, as so many creators seem to want to do, it would have badly failed, just like all the other small RPG creators using AI. I can't pretend to know what it's like to be a professional artist. I'm just an amateur who took literally a month to draw this with Procreate on an iPad. But I knew that generative AI would never have been able to cut it. In my day job, I'm currently watching AI begin to wipe out first point of contact customer service jobs. And you know, those jobs are terrible, so that's not necessarily a problem if it opens other opportunities for people or makes their jobs easier. But it's also clear that AI is not quite capable of having a real useful conversation with someone, and it's probably not going to get there for a while. Seeing this technology used to create art for the first time was also incredible at first. There's an uncanny and seemingly effortless beauty to this facade, but that illusion is quickly broken after seeing 100 portraits with the same generic poses and vacant expressions. The same overly complicated directionless design, and the same weird mistakes of a program that doesn't actually know what it's making an image of, or that it's meant to evoke a storyful fantasy. Now, we might be seeing glimpses of what a future fusion of artist and AI could be with new technology in sketch-to-image generation, where a real talented artist creates the basic outline and composition and sketch of an image, and then the AI fills in the details. It's still plagued by the weird problems that text-to-image suffers from, but it seems to somewhat overcome the one enormous, unforgivable limitation of text-to-image, which is a total inability to come up with any composition. If you blur your eyes, they all look the same. But maybe not with sketch-to-image. So I gave it a shot. I took my line work of the cover art, and I put it through a free trial of a sketch-to-image generator to see if it could save what would be another few weeks of digital painting for someone like me. And when I did, I could see it extract my art's soul right before my eyes. It didn't understand what I was trying to do or what was important about the art, so it casually undid everything that mattered. The apprentice's expressions no longer provide a recognizable mood or individual character or like a reasonable reaction to the scene. The background is wiped clean of all the quirky details that suggest anything interesting about the wizard that the apprentices serve. Even the cat is gone, and those are the things that mattered. It was never going to be the detail of the digital painting that caught anyone's eye. It was always going to be the evoked storyfulness of the composition, of all the things that are there for a reason. I know that there are better sketch-to-image generators out there, but none of them can fix that fundamental problem. I can never explain to a program what a fantasy piece of art is meant to evoke or what story it's meant to tell, but I can explain it to a skilled artist. That's why, regardless of the morality, which is obviously questionable when the AI's training material is stolen, it would be foolish for any publishers to think that AI art is going to replace human artists for creating things like this. For now, at least, it can only do very low-value stuff, like mindless clickbait ads, or the flood of AI-generated fantasy art fouling the internet. Just looking for a fantasy artist to hire meant shoveling through pages of AI slush. But the saddest thing is to see this permeating the world of small-time solo RPG designers. The DMs Guild and Drive-Thru RPG are filled with generated art used by designers who I can't exactly blame for doing it. They want their creation to be beautiful, and they can't afford the hundreds or likely thousands of dollars it takes to commission art like that. So they take this shortcut. But if you're one of those creators, trust me that it's a shortcut that goes nowhere. And it just makes the audience of RPG players more frustrated and cynical. The people who might pick up your game absolutely can sniff out generated art a mile away, and a good number of them will reject it out of hand just for that. But even the ones who don't, or just don't care, will find it disappointing and uninspiring. The artist didn't even know it was meant to tell a story, so there's nothing there for the player to play with. Never say never, but at least for now, AI art will always fail to evoke a compelling fantasy, which means that you won't have a game. Good art is worth everything to an RPG. It's worth time, it's worth money, and it's worth care. And if I was a real artist, I would be able to say a lot more about that. But as a publisher, both professionally and as a hobbyist, I can say that RPG art is the reason why there are tens of thousands of people who back thousands of crowdfunded RPG books, even if they might not play those RPGs with their friends more than once or twice. I mean, I hope that those who try The Apprentice's Grimoire for free play it a few more times than that, but I'm thrilled to hear about anyone's experience playing it once. Because I know that means that they played it a lot more than that. When they looked at the art, when it compelled them to pick up one of their favorite fantasy novels and flip through to create a whimsical spell, that's them playing the game more than I ever could have asked for. Because anyone with an RPG is playing it just as much as anyone else every time they look at and read a game to indulge in the fantasy it evokes. 'Cause it's a collectible art book. So if I have the opportunity to keep making things well into the future, it'll be because I'm able to invest in the kind of art that any role-playing game deserves. So far, it's been modest and slow, since I've only been able to hire myself as an obvious amateur. But if I'm gonna make good games, they need good art. To that end, if you've checked out my videos and games and supplements and think they're good, I have a Patreon that you can join and PDFs you can download. Links in the description. My hope is to use the money I can get to make bigger and better things in the future, by paying artists what they deserve. Speaking of which, my next couple projects are going to venture into D&D as I begin to fill out the lack of creativity that I think exists in the new 2024 rulebooks. So definitely subscribe and keep an eye out for that. In any case, people, buy your books and pay your artists, because RPGs are art books.